let's dive right into the very heart of the conflict today. We are looking closely at the shifting power dynamics, the incredibly desperate strategies, and the profoundly dark secrets that are just bubbling to the surface in this brutal, unforgiving stage of the Targaryen civil war. I'm telling you, this isn't just about dragons clashing in the sky anymore. Not even close. It is about psychological warfare. It's about the sheer, undeniable rot festering within both factions right now. Every single character we are following is being pushed to their absolute mental breaking point, and the decisions they are making in the shadows at this exact moment, those are going to echo through the rest of the war. Let's look exactly at how the board is being set for absolute devastation. We start our journey at the Eyrie, where these chilling words completely expose a deeply perilous situation. Rhaena Targaryen is harboring a massive, incredibly dangerous secret with the wild dragon Sheepstealer. And the undeniable tension she faces with Lady Jane Arryn is quite literally reaching a boiling point. Lady Jane is essentially demanding to know why Rhaena is lingering around, explicitly reminding her of the absolute peril she is standing in. The Eyrie is supposed to be this impenetrable sanctuary, right? But it's quickly becoming a trap. If Rhaenyra uncovers Rhaena's true identity as the newly bonded rider of Sheepstealer, the consequences are going to be utterly catastrophic. Remember, Rhaenyra demands absolute loyalty. She demands total transparency. Withholding a dragon of that massive size, that is tantamount to treason in her eyes. There is no gray area there.
And this brilliantly illustrates the tension in the Vale, especially when we factor in the heavy, incredibly intentional cinematic foreshadowing of the Moon Door. I mean, the sound design alone is just brilliant. With those echoing screams constantly drifting up from the abyss, it creates this suffocating atmosphere of dread. The narrative structure here practically guarantees that a fatal drop is imminent. You simply do not establish a terrifying, high-altitude trapdoor this prominently without a character eventually taking the plunge. It's Chekhov's gun, but 1,000 times more lethal. The sheer physical danger of the environment perfectly mirrors the political danger Rhaenyra is currently in. The lies are stocking up, and the exact moment Rhaenyra realizes Daemon betrayed her by withholding the truth about Sheepstealer, the entire dynamic of the Black faction is going to shatter into a million pieces.
Section 1. Shadows of King's Landing, Subterfuge and Secrets.
Now, I want you to look at the grim reality of Aegon's fractured psyche here. We see Aegon, Larys Strong, and Tywin Lannister covertly burying a camp leader at Rook's Rest. Let me be clear, this is not a battlefield casualty meant to be honored or remembered. They are desperately, frantically concealing Aegon's petty, revenge-driven murder. Aegon executed this man purely because he had previously humiliated him by forcing him to kiss his boots. That's it. Aegon's incredibly fragile ego simply cannot handle the truth coming out that he is executing his own people over personal slights rather than, actual military strategy. It perfectly showcases a king who is completely unraveling under the crushing weight of the crown, becoming increasingly reliant on whisperers and schemers to literally bury his crimes in the dirt.
Meanwhile, on the other side, the Blacks are playing their own incredibly dangerous game of cloak and dagger. Disguised as a common gold cloak, Daemon is carefully tracking a mysterious, two-colored-eyed killer who is systematically assassinating his most loyal men in the City Watch. The cinematic tension in these scenes is just palpable. The hunter has essentially become the hunted in his very own city, which turns the claustrophobic, winding streets of King's Landing into a terrifying game of cat and mouse. Every single shadow is a potential threat, and Daemon is slowly realizing that his historical, iron-fisted grip on the gold cloaks is violently slipping right through his fingers. If we dig into the deep lore for a second, the evidence heavily suggests this killer with heterochromia is actually Perkin the Flea. He is a legendary instigator. Working in absolute secrecy with Ormond Hightower, Perkin is executing an absolute masterclass in urban destabilization. He isn't raising a massive army to storm the gates, he's acting as a precise scalpel. By taking out the Gold Cloak leadership one by one, he is purposefully rotting Rhaenyra's grip on the city from the inside out. He's turning her most vital, trusted defense force into a paranoid, fractured mess. It is brilliant asymmetric warfare, and it is happening right under the Queen's nose.
Amidst all this horrific violence, we have Helaena Targaryen, who is entirely consumed by her frantic needlepoint. But I want to emphasize, she isn't just sewing to pass the time. She is symbolically weaving the overarching historical tapestries of this entire tragedy. Her prophetic mind literally sees the threads of fate pulling together. Even more terrifying is her ominous, repeated desire to see the moon. For those of us paying close attention to the deep lore and her prophetic character arc, this is massive foreshadowing. Seeing the moon heavily hints at a devastating descent into chaos. It represents an eclipse of the current power structure that will completely upend the capital as we know it. She knows the doom is already woven into the fabric of their reality. Section 2. The Greens gain ground. Patience over fire.
Let's meticulously map out Ormond Hightower's multifaceted strategy around Tumbleton because it is fascinating. The Greens know full well they lack the raw dragon numbers right now, so Ormond is weaponizing patience. He is brilliantly letting the chaos in the capital do all of his heavy lifting, basically allowing the Blacks to tear themselves apart from within, using paranoia and starvation. Simultaneously, he's just waiting. He is waiting for Aemon to return to the fold to balance the skies. But his most devious move by far is his preparation for targeted extortion. He knows Hugh Hammer is guarding the skies for the Blacks, but he also knows Hugh's wife is dangerously close in Tumbleton. Ormond is positioning himself to blackmail the most powerful dragon riders in all of Westeros by holding exactly what they love hostage. It's cold and it's incredibly calculated. Now contrast Ormond's calculated patience with the grim, shockingly violent reality of the impending conflict that history remembers as the Butcher's Ball. Criston Cole is charging headlong into a completely unwinnable battle against the Rivermen and the incredibly formidable Stark Winterwolves. Cole is operating on pure, unadulterated fatalism at this point. This is a desperate march into oblivion. He is fully aware that he's leading his men into an absolute slaughter, but his overwhelming guilt, his perceived failures, and his deeply twisted sense of duty have left him feeling like he has absolutely nothing left to live for. He isn't fighting for victory anymore. He is seeking a warrior's death just to escape the political nightmare he helped create in the first place.
Section 3. Vhagar and Harrenhal's Ghosts, a Fragmented Mind. There is a genuinely terrifying realization regarding the destruction of the Riverlands that we need to talk about. Instead of Aemon strategically directing the carnage, the narrative here heavily implies that Vhagar is seemingly committing horrific, fiery war crimes across the country entirely on her own instinct. While her rider lies incapacitated in Harrenhal, this massive dragon is fully unleashed. We really have to lean into the sheer horror of this concept. What actually happens when a creature of that magnitude, an actual living weapon of mass destruction, operates without a human master to tether it? It is driven only by centuries of predatory instinct, burning the landscape to ash purely because it is in her fundamental nature to conquer and destroy. It's absolutely chilling. Notice Aemon's intense, almost uncomfortable vulnerability at this exact moment. We find him down at the Harrenhal stables, facing down potential assassins with nothing but the Valyrian steel sword, Blackfire. The visual contrast they are building here is deeply intentional. He is completely stripped of Vhagar, the monstrous, castle-sized beast that defines his entire identity and projects his worldly power. For the very first time in his adult life, Aemon is truly, profoundly vulnerable. He is forced to rely on his own two hands holding a standard-sized sword, rather than hiding behind the world's largest living dragon just to survive the night.
Section 4. Aemond and Alice Rivers, a twisted bond.
To really understand this incredibly twisted dynamic, we have to look back at Aemon's severe childhood trauma. We have to remember his tragic inability to distinguish maternal love from romantic desire. A psychological confusion that we saw brilliantly highlighted by his incredibly unsettling, tense interactions with his own mother right before he left King's Landing. Alice Rivers perfectly slots herself into that exact emotional void. She uses this psychological fracture to her absolute advantage. She provides the nurturing, motherly comfort he so desperately craves, while simultaneously blurring the lines of affection to manipulate a mind that is fundamentally broken and desperately seeking validation. Because Alicent's ultimate goal in all of this is completely calculated. She isn't just some passive healer tending to a wounded prince. No, she wants to claim the cursed, ruinous castle of Harrenhal for herself. And as we know, controlling Harrenhal means controlling the Riverlands. By binding the realm's most dangerous prince to her emotionally, she is essentially securing the ultimate prize. Manipulating Aemond into securing a green victory isn't out of some hidden loyalty to his family. It is her most calculated, intelligent path to absolute, undeniable power in a world that usually discards women like her without a second thought. There is a profound parallel happening right in front of us, and we have to ask, is Aemon's current weirwood-induced isolation and this intense string of hallucinations meant to directly mirror Daemon's earlier spiritual journey? Think about it. Daemon was broken down by visions until he ultimately submitted to the overarching prophecies of ice and fire, losing a massive amount of his free will in the process. Is the ancient mystical network of Harrenhal currently doing the exact same thing to Aemond? It certainly seems like these immensely powerful men are being systematically stripped of their agency, forced into preordained roles in the great magical wars that are yet to come. And then we have the massive unspoken lore implications of this shadowy transaction. We see Aemon potentially handing Aelys Rivers a dragon egg. Traditionally, as we know, these are placed solely in the cradles of legitimate Targaryen infants to bind the bloodline. Giving an unhatched dragon to a mystical witch operating in the cursed, darkened halls of Harrenhal, that raises incredibly dark, fascinating questions. It heavily hints at secret, unrecorded Targaryen descendants and magical bloodlines operating entirely in the shadows, far, far away from the recorded history of the Citadel. Section 5. Rhaenyra's desperate next moves, the Queen's Burden. Look closely at the brilliant cinematic framing in this shot. Rhaenyra is physically positioned from above to form a raven shape with her dark clothing and her stance. This visual storytelling isn't an accident. It directly communicates her lack of true agency. It connects her directly to the overarching unseen influence of the Weirwood network. It essentially implies that these characters, despite all their massive dragons, their grand royal titles, and their sweeping armies, are merely pawns on a much larger board. They are being actively manipulated by ancient magical forces that are orchestrating these very events from beyond the veil of normal human perception.
Because the reality on the ground is just dire, leading to growing, incredibly desperate frustration. We see Rhaenyra literally drowning in endless smallfolk petitions as the rapidly decaying, starving conditions inside King's Landing threaten her reign from the inside out. Yes, Rhaenyra successfully took the city, but the logistical nightmare of actually feeding and ruling a blockaded, starving populace is proving to be a challenge that Fire and Blood simply cannot solve. You can't feed a city with dragons. It just doesn't work. The very people she is meant to protect and rule are turning into a massive powder keg right beneath the Red Keep.
Facing the systematic murder of her gold cloaks, Rhaenyra is pushed to the absolute edge, resulting in this chilling vow for absolute retribution. But this demand for justice is sharply juxtaposed with Daemon's ruthless, fiery counsel. His solution to resistance is horrifyingly simple. Just burn Tumbleton and all the Green supporters to the ground. Annihilate them entirely, leave nothing but ash. It deeply highlights the incredibly thin line Rhaenyra is currently walking. She's desperately trying to remain a just, honorable ruler, but the immense pressures of war are pushing her closer and closer to becoming a tyrant who rules only through ash and fire. So with covert assassins stalking the capital, rogue dragons burning the countryside on instinct, and the heavy, suffocating burden of ancient prophecies bearing down on all of them, which faction, and more importantly, which fractured mind, will survive this crushing psychological pressure? As the doom of Westeros inevitably